Inflation, which last fall was described as transitory, now seems to be embedded. What is driving continuing high prices, and will anything help ease the pressure? Welcome to Global Sourcing Insights from CIPS. This edition is co-production of CIPS Americas and the Michigan State University Broad College of Business. I'm Bob Rossback. Here to help us make sense of the data is our regular contributor, Jason Miller, Associate Professor in the Broad College of Business at Michigan State. Jason is calling in, so we won't see him, but we can see his collection of really bad news charts. So welcome, Jason.
Thanks for having me on, Bob.
All right, what are we looking at here? It looks
And
bad. It
so
looks
what
like a big slope up.
Yes, unfortunately it does. So what we're looking at here is the Bureau of Labor Statistics Producer Price Index for final demand finished goods. So this is going to include things like food products, washing machines, automobiles, so anything essentially that's being made by a finished goods manufacturer that's going to be going on to the consumer. And the bad news for this is if we take a look, just as you mentioned, we can see this very strong upward slope of price. And things didn't really get better in April. Prices went up about 0.8% from where they were in March, and they now are about 15.5% above where they were last year at this time. And the challenge is that if you take a look at series like this, especially the year-over-year change, they're what we call very stable. And what that means is essentially it's going to take a while for, these prices, those year-over-year increases to come down. And so unfortunately for the consumer, it appears that kind of in general, those goods that they're buying, there's no real evidence they're going to becoming cheaper anytime soon.
So let's step up into the supply chain upstream a little bit and look at what you call stage 4 inputs. And so what are these that we're looking at with this series?
Yeah, so what this series is the Bureau of Labor Statistics categorizes manufacturers based on how far essentially upstream in the supply chain they are. And so a stage 4 goods producer would be a company making food products for consumers or making automobiles, making, again, refrigerators, making furniture. And what this series is doing is it's measuring the prices of the inputs that they utilize. So in other words, are their costs going up? And what you see is this plot looks essentially identical to what we had before, because what we're seeing is the cost of inputs for those final demand producers is itself going up. What this means is that you're looking at, again, more cost push inflation that's going to be taking place over the coming months, because it seems very unlikely that we start to see this series, slow its rate of increase in a substantial manner, given the price increases we've seen, for example, in agricultural products or in metals and chemical products as well.
So here is your year-to-year chart. We're way up there, but it seems maybe is there hope on the horizon, or maybe not?
There may be a little bit of hope here that things may have started to peak a little bit, but you can tell how long it took for that chart to essentially go up. That's well over a year, about a year and a half that you've got plotted up there where we've started to see substantial gains. And so unless something changes, you would assume that we're looking probably at, and again, multiple additional months until we start to see those year-over-year price changes start getting into the realm of, back to the pre-COVID period of, let's say, 3.5% that we saw in 2018. And so we've got a while to go yet to get down to that point.
All right, let's take a quick look at a couple of areas. This is one processed foods.
This is companies making, foods not only for people, but also for animals. So you're then feeding this back upstream in the supply chain in the form of, feeding cows and chickens. What you can see is even though it felt like maybe things were going to be better, towards the fourth quarter of 2021, we started to see this very pronounced increase over the past couple months. And this has been fueled by the surge of agricultural commodity prices, largely due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so as we start thinking about where we're at right now, we've got year over year gains that are in the tune of, 13, 14%, and they seem to be sort of holding consistently there. And so what this is telling me is that the American consumer, those grocery store trips are not going to be getting cheaper again anytime soon, because we're seeing the price of food products go up substantially from where they were this time last year.
And we hear a lot about trucking and freight. So a quick look there. It doesn't look like this is cooling off at all.
No, precisely. So there have been some, arguments made that, with the spot market for the dry van truckload sector cooling, that we would start, maybe that was indicative even of substantially declining volumes and maybe even a freight recession coming. But the pricing data is not indicative of this at all. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics has prices for the trucking companies receive for their services. And this is, again, sort of over the road, dry van, truckload firms going up actually about 5% in April from May. And right now we're up a staggering 39.5% from where we were a year ago. And so you can just see how that series has just absolutely taken off. Now, of course, part of the increase in March and April from where we were, last year's fuel surcharge, but it's not that much could be made up by surcharge. A big chunk of this is just line haul prices going up.
If you're in procurement, the takeaways here are maybe if you have an opportunity, well, first of all, you can't just assume that the prices that you're looking at right now are all caused by the same factor. There's complex factors that are involved in this, and so you really have to look deeply into your supply chain to really determine whether the prices or the price increases that you're facing are something that is really embedded in the inputs, or is it something where you just don't have a number of suppliers, or you don't have enough multiple sourcing in order to sort of diminish that being held hostage by a single supplier. So I think it sounds like the idea is you really have to be very careful and look deeply beyond just what your first supplier tells you. Is that kind of it seems like that's a big takeaway from what I'm looking at.
No, that certainly is. I mean, one of the things I think we have to keep in mind is that, as you mentioned, if it's cost push inflation, you and your rivals are likely going to be experiencing this sort of the same way, and it's going to be sort of indicative of across different suppliers of that commodity. If it's more demand pull, well, maybe that means you need to start thinking about, okay, do I need to find a different supplier, or depending on what it is specifically that you're producing, is it something where I could substitute, for example, into a different commodity category if you're in that situation? If you're in a situation where you can hold inventory and you have got reason to expect prices are going to go up, this may be a time to pull things forward a little bit. I mean, we're not saying pull forward, multiple months, but maybe pull forward a couple additional weeks to just get a sense of, what's going on. Right now, the biggest wild card we have is nobody really understands quite what is going on in China with the COVID-induced lockdowns and what that will mean once they get the Omicron variant under control and are fully back and operating, what that means for ocean freight volumes, but then what that also means for sort of their demand for, exports from the U.S., and things of that sort. So that's a big wild card. And then obviously what happens with the war in Ukraine.
A lot to think about, but I think some really good things for procurement professionals to think about and to be considering in their decisions in the next month or so. And thank you very much, Jason. Appreciate your insights and your data, and we will look forward to seeing as this plays out month to month. We'll be back. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
This has been Global Sourcing Insights from CIPS. Have a great day.